Afternoon, almost 3 o'clock in Johannesburg. It's a bit chilly outside because it's a winter season. Welcome to Decolonization Conversation podcast. I'm with my good friend, Professor Mjiba Frehiwot. Mjiba, this thing has been long coming.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, but we're here now.
Yeah, it's been long coming. I think I want to approach it this way. Oftentimes as people, we talk about our work and what we do, and we miss the opportunity to tell people about who we are, because who we are, I believe, informs what we do.
Yeah.
Who is Mjiba Frehiwot?
Who am I? I am a Pan-Africanist. I'm a daughter. I'm an academic. I'm an auntie. I'm a revolutionary. I believe in humanity first. Yeah, I think that's who I am.
I often drum about how I grew up and where I grew up, because I have memories of asking very bigger, complex questions even when I was younger, and growing up with my grandmother. Its significance to the person I am and even to date. What would you say about the younger you? And is there a relationship between that and to where you are?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, many people can tell from my accent that I was somehow connected to the U.S. So I was born there, and in the west side of the U.S., California. But I moved around a lot, and the movement helped me see the world differently, right? So I spent a considerable amount of time from like 11 to 16 in upstate New York, Rochester to be specific, where my father's family's from. And they live there to this day. And in that space, there's a very distinct class and race differences, right? African black people lived in one space, white people lived in another space, right? I think it was in Rochester where I began to develop a sense of consciousness, right? Not necessarily Pan-African consciousness, but consciousness, because I began asking critical questions like, something is wrong here, right? How come in the communities in which I'm staying, the majority of people are of African descent, and we find ourselves, struggling economically, right, politically, etc. And so that began to kind of fuel my ideas, right? And at the time, I didn't realize it fueled my ideas, but I began just looking around and thinking to myself, but something is wrong.
Something is not right.
I can't figure out what it is, right? And then my family from Rochester moved back to Berkeley, California at the time, where I was born, by the way. And I took an African American studies class at Berkeley High School. And interestingly, the class I took, very interesting. I took 2 classes my first semester back. I was in 11th grade, which for us, many places in the continent, it's SHS like 2, for example.
Okay.
And so I took a West African dance class, and I took a class, interesting, male-female relationships, which you would think, but how in the world, what in the world?
Is that African American?
Exactly, like what does this have to do with anything, right?
Yeah.
But in the class, interestingly, we really didn't discuss male-female relationships at all. We really looked at Pan-African history. There was this teacher, Dr. McKnight, who was the chair of the African American Studies Department. He recently passed, may his soul rest in peace. He was not our teacher. There was another brother called Brother Ayinde, who happened to be in what we call the All African People's Revolutionary Party.
Okay.
And so he was teaching us Pan-Africanism. So we had members of the APRP coming into the classroom, talking about the Pan-African struggle, talking about Africa, talking about the importance of a revolutionary understanding of life, right? And talking about how capitalism is ultimately the enemy of humanity. And so at the time, I didn't even make any connections. Then I graduated from Berkeley High School. I went to San Jose State. and I majored in social work because I thought, I need to get a job, right? Because when you're young, you're like, I got to get something that can pay the bills. It's like I got to eat kind of situation. And then I took this class, African history, I think like 1800 to present.
Okay.
And Dr. Milner was the teacher, the lecturer at the time, and he ultimately took us through like African history as well as African American history, right? And I'll never forget in that class, I was so challenged because my study habits were not what they should be. I think I failed a couple quizzes.
Wow.
Dr. Milner was like, "Please come to my office," and I went to his office, and the first thing he asked me, "Well, how do you study?" And I said, I study, in the afternoon after lunch or something. And Dr. Milner was like, no, you need to study first thing in the morning because that's when that's when your mind is clearest, right? Interestingly enough, when I wake up and I write now at 5 a.m., my mind is clear, right?
That's true.
But Dr. Milner challenged me to really sort of reevaluate who I am as an African person. Even still to that moment, I believed I was Black. And then I joined an organization called Striving Black Brothers and Sisters at San Jose State.
Is it still at the university level?
Still
right?
university level, yes. And the organization was a new organization, but at the time there was a very sort of bubbling Pan-African fervor on campus, right? And so there was the African Awareness Planning Committee. There was a Black Faculty and Staff Association. There was, multiple organizations on campus which were really not necessarily pushing Pan-Africanism, but were thinking about alternative ideas. So I joined Striving Black Brothers and Sisters, and we started organizing programs. So one of our first programs, I was like the second president, right?
Okay.
So one of our first programs, second or third president, one of our first programs was a Kwanzaa program, right? And so we had the huge Kwanzaa programs. And so for people who are not familiar, it's this holiday that Malana Karenga organized.
Okay.
And basically it celebrates sort of African cultural history, so like these 7 days, right, of Kwanzaa, Umoja, there's all of these principles, Kuchichakali, et cetera. People can look it up. And then we organized, so then we started organizing like more political programs, right? Yeah. We organized an African naming ceremony, which is where I have my middle name is I actually was adopted at that time. This is in the 90s. And so we just really started organizing like Pan-African programs. At the time, also the All African People's Revolutionary Party was on campus organizing. And then in 96, I know I'm aging myself, but it is what it is. I went to Ghana on the study abroad program, W.E.B. Boys study abroad program. And I stepped off the plane as a Black nationalist, and I came back as a Pan-Africanist. Wow. Just seeing the linkages, right, between Ghana, reading about Nkrumah, reading about the Convention People's Party, and just reading about thinking about Pan-Africanism, and seeing that African people globally we are one people. Yeah. So that's how I kind of came to where I'm sitting today.
Yeah, I think if I hear you correctly, you went, which speaks about place and time and space, right?
Yep.
That allowed you to question the inequalities, the obvious, almost even when you can answer, when you don't have answer, but you can see there's something that's awkward with the settings. And that journey took you to even to your high schooling, to start answering the question of maybe belonging, maybe questioning who you are. What is the essence? Because you said you're a Black nationalist, then you're converted to a Pan-African. Can you tell us a bit about the difference, with more emphasis on what is Pan-African and what are other constructs that are similar but not necessarily the same?
Yeah, perfect. So I think Pan-Africanism as a movement ultimately seeks to unify and liberate African people globally against foreign intervention, right, and liberate us so that we can manage our own affairs, as Kwame Nkrumah has said. And also some people view Pan-Africanism as a cultural component, right? So they think that being a Pan-Africanist means wearing African gear or wearing locks or whatever, which is fine, or embracing African name, which all of those things are fine. They're all a representation of the Pan-African project. But then others also say that the Pan-African project is a very political project, right? And so we must also begin to shift and change the economic system, right? So I'm in the, as mentioned, I'm in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, have been since the 90s. And so our definition of Pan-Africanism is the total liberation and unification of Africa and African people under scientific socialism. Everyone may not agree with that. That's okay. But at least we need people to agree that Africa must be united in order to be liberated, so our people can have redemption globally.
Yeah.
And I think that project can operate on multiple levels, right? So it can operate at the grassroots level. It can operate in communities, and oftentimes many African people globally, like, we engage in Pan-African acts, which are very collective, very communal, right? Thinking about the betterment of community. We engage with them on an everyday basis, but we're unconscious that they're Pan-African acts, right? And so if you ask a market woman, for example, on the border between Togo and Ghana, like, is she engaging in Pan-Africanism? She may be like, no, I'm just engaging in business. But how is it that you're on the border engaging people across borders, right? You're thinking in two different languages, you're engaging, in two different currencies, you're advocating for borders to be open. These are all Pan-African acts, but you may say it's a very unconscious thing. And then we have people who, then we have community or institutional Pan-Africanism. You may have an organization that's thinking about, uniting people for a particular cause, or you may have an institution that's a more, radical institution. Political parties are also Pan-Africanist. And you also have state-led Pan-Africanism, which in this day and age, in the contemporary world, it's very difficult to pinpoint one country in Africa that is actually utilizing the Pan-African projects to its full potential.
AU?
The AU, I think, is a Pan-African institution. It's a Pan-African institution, right? But I don't know if they are equipped to fully take Pan-Africanism to its fruition, right? And I think part of the challenge is that it's the challenge of the global economy, political economy, right? Because many African countries are, indebted to the West. And so when you have, the leadership of those African countries that are indebted to the West, it becomes very difficult to talk about the liberation and unification of Africa, right? And so I think the AU has potential as long as it can become more radical. And I'm not sure if the AU has the ability at the moment to become more radical.
There are people who can theorize around interpreting that because of the global imbalances, the economic dependency, it makes it very difficult to have a voice as an institution. I think, without sounding a little too abstract, I want us to move to we know that a MasterCard-funded project has been on calls to to take the discussions around many Africa evaluation approaches further. I just want to see the role of Pan-Africanism in around decoloniality as a theory, and self-dependence. I think there's a theory, development study tells about self-dependence. Around when Africans want that independence, that freedom, that unity of knowledge, liberating themselves from knowledge, especially in the field of evaluation, which myself and you are involved in. What would you say about the role of that thinking in sort of consolidating indigenous knowledge system that are African? I think the Africa principle talks about African-led, that are African-led. What would you say to that, and how do you feel about? Maybe you can share a little bit about what you know about the project.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that the project, you and I were part of the Pan-African Indigenous Evaluation Consortium, one of the projects. And I think the project overall is seeking to identify methods and tools to evaluate projects, development projects across the continent, using a sort of African-led, made in Africa evaluation approaches, right? I think that it is situated on foundational African philosophies like Ubuntu, like Sankofa, right, in which African people view the world, making sense of the world through their own lens.
Yeah.
I think that the Pan-African project is central to that. And it's central to that not because we're saying that, African people should just unify just to unify. The Pan-African project is also about the transformation of our minds, right? Because the thing is, we critically think about shifting the way that we think, right? And making sure that the way that we think is not tied to a Eurocentric worldview, but is tied to an African-centered worldview, right? And I think this is also central too, because the thing is, you can't unify unless you believe that you're human, right? And so part of our challenge is the society, the global society has said that we are not human. Right? So when you're not human, you don't have the ability to have agency, right? You don't have the ability to be studied or to do evaluation as subject and not object, right? And so I think the Pan-African projects helps us sort of turn the evaluation ecosystem and model on its head to say that, particularly in the African continent, but globally, to say that whoever is being so-called evaluated should be central to the evaluation project, right? And should also be able to a certain extent liberate one's mind, right? To not to view themselves as Kwame Nkrumah says, to manage their own affairs, right? And to view themselves as relevant stakeholders is not the word I'm looking for, but relevant and central to this project called humanity. And that project, occurs at the community level, at the nation level, at the individual level. As a matter of fact, I mean, not to be super academic, but I'm an academic, so anyways, I'll do it. But Walter Rodney in How Europe Underdeveloped Africa says that society transforms from individual to community to society, right? And back and forth. So one can't think that you're going to transform community without talking about individual, without talking about community, right? So you can't just come in and begin to transform. And also you can't evaluate without, as Walter Rodney says, thinking how these different sectors intersect with each other, right? And so that to me is sort of what Pan-Africanism brings to this project, but also it's as much as it's about saying that African people have agency, it's about recognizing that African people have had evaluation methods and practices for eons.
Time immemorial,
Time immemorial. I mean, you can't tell me that, how many ever thousands of years ago we didn't have evaluations. Look at some of the ancient kingdoms, Mali, Songhai, ancient Kemet, upper and lower Kemet, etc. Are you telling me they didn't evaluate their economies or their political systems? It's not possible. There's expansion. You telling me that you didn't evaluate to see if whatever community you were going to expand to could benefit you or negative or take you down the wrong path. So, and even every day we evaluate. We wake up in the morning, we evaluate how much money we have. We evaluate what our next steps are. We evaluate what schools our children are going to go to, right? We evaluate, does it make sense to do this or that or this in order to move our families forward, right?
I think as a teacher, what do you look forward to in terms of, would you consider infusing, and maybe as a teacher at a personal level, but perhaps maybe at a continental level, around shifting the needle because I think education was used mostly as a tool to manage or control the way we think about things, the way we see things. But it can also be used to reverse the very same thing. So I'm just thinking around where do you see in your classroom personally and at the continental level the role of the thinking that Made in Africa evaluation approaches is bringing into the room, and what do you anticipate some of its effects in the next future?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I think that, in my classroom, I tend to center African ideas and philosophies, period. I teach an African studies, right? So so everyone doesn't have the same liberty, but I think that everyone can find African-centered ideas and philosophies, in whatever field you're in. That's one. I think this kind of a toolkit or this kind of a approach, I don't want to call it a toolkit, this approach, to evaluation will help not only us as educators to center African ideas and philosophies, but it will validate it, right? I mean, I think one of the things that we tend to do as Pan-Africanists or as people who are shifting the narrative is we tend to say, well, this is what Europe did to us, and therefore we are also good, right? Oh, Europe said we don't have medical doctors, so we have medical doctors. Oh, Europe said we don't, right? And it's like, are we centering our whole idea on Europe, right? You know, and I do some work around decolonization. So, I mean, technically speaking, you could say I'm a semi-decolonization scholar. I'm more of an Africanist, Pan-Africanist scholar. But I also question this question of the decolonial idea, right? Decolonial thought, because we are now centering our thought on the colonial project. It doesn't make sense, right? So what this does is it helps us say, we're not centering on Europe, we're centering on African ideas and philosophies that have been here. Right, since time immemorial. And we're highlighting them. And I think that what this will do is it will help us to not only think differently, but also act differently, right? And globally, I think when we begin to teach, and not just Mel, but also begin to teach African studies or sociology or whatever, right? We are thinking about, okay, what African, examples can I use, right? That makes sense, right? In this particular situation. How can I infuse what I engage with over this, whatever, how many ever months we've been working with this, or even over this 1 to 2 day period? How can I bring this into the classroom and show students and demonstrate that, yes, this has happened, it is continuing to happen, right? And also to innovate. It's also important to kind of innovate and say that, education, like culture and learning and language, none of those things are static, right? They all evolve. Emil Cocker-Ball says that culture is rampant, right? Like, culture is not rampant, but culture is dynamic, right? And the dynamicism of culture, right, says it is always evolving, right? So as you engage with others, as we think collectively together, right, we evolve our thinking, and I think that's what this has done. It's helped us evolve both our thinking, but also the way in which we interpret our own relationship, right, in this project, because this is not
aesthetic.
It's not an aesthetic, and it doesn't belong to anyone, right? Like, that's the thing. I think sometimes we think that this knowledge belongs to Mjiba because she did the research. No, it doesn't. It belongs to African people. It belongs to the masses.
As we come to almost the close of the session,
wow, that's soon.
What do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? I'm not sure if this has anything. Like, this is a strange one. So what do I do for fun? I like going to the beach, actually. Okay. I love the beach. I love the water. I think that the ocean has like a whole sort of dynamic ecosystem, and there's something mystical about an entire ecosystem that you have no idea about, right? That. And then I think there's I don't know, the water just like calms my nerves. That's one. And then I also like concerts. I also like documentaries. Unfortunately, I missed a Emil Cocker-Ball documentary the other day. That's a whole another story. That was just, it was just here at one of the movie theaters down there by the Market Theater by Vitz. And what else do? I like concerts. And I've also started. Well, I've not started. I like sci-fi, so like I've started reading sci-fi because I want to write in science fiction. Okay. So I want to write a science fiction novel, but with a very Afrofuturistic approach. So I'm rereading all of Octavia Butler's works. Yes. So that you were shocked, right?
That's interesting. I know my son likes reading this Korean, I don't know what they call it, which I find it odd. But I've never liked novels, by the way.
Really? No, they're very good. They're very good.
I've never liked novels. No, I think we bring I know you work hard, and a lot of the times you talk about your work, but you're a human being, So in our podcast, we try and also bring the personal
nice
to this. In closing, talk to me about what you look for, what are some of the work that you are doing? I know you write a lot, and what should people expect and look out for from the work that they're doing? And you can also tell people where to follow you and so on.
Okay, perfect. So I do two things really, right? Really not maybe three things when it comes to work. One is I do a lot of work on Pan-Africanism. So I am writing a book on Kwame Nkrumah and Julius Nyere's Pan-African projects. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
As
Mwalimu
frontline
is my
states.
favorite.
Oh,
He's
the
my
guy is
favorite
on
leader.
point, right? Exactly. So I'm doing that. I'm also writing some pieces around historical institutions like the Bureau of African Affairs in Ghana and some of the seminal conferences like the Afro-Asian Solidarity Movement conferences and the All African Peoples conferences and the Afro-Asian Writers Association conferences. And then I'm also looking from the valuation side, you know, how can we operationalize or how can we think from a philosophical perspective, not just around Made in Africa valuation, but also philosophically, like how do we bring the philosophies into evaluation, right? So that's something that's kind of in the works, but not necessarily on the front burner, but it's in the works. I hope to have something before the end of this this year. That's December. And then also, I mean, I think I have to shamelessly plug the African Evaluation Journal. I am the editor-in-chief, and we're really looking to take the journal and ensure that the journal is a central journal for not just evaluation in Africa, but also conceptualizing and philosophizing about how African evaluation is different than, you know, evaluations led through Eurocentric ideas. And lastly, what was the last question? What else?
Where do people find your work? And,
where do people find me? So you can find me on LinkedIn, Mjiba Frehiwot. You can find me on X, Africa is Home. You can find me, those are the two important ones. I mean, like, to be honest with you, I am not as, I'm not as recent of a tweeter as usual.
I don't have Instagram.
Yeah, I have Instagram too, but I don't really try to put too much. Yeah, Instagram is like, I post sometimes on Instagram. Oh, and this is something else. What was can you imagine? It just ran out of my head what I was going to say. It's gone. It has, yes, and there's something else that I forgot to mention. I also am a certified life coach. I forgot to mention that. Yes. So
what do you do? What does that mean?
So basically, I help people. I specifically focus on Black African women, and I help them manage transitions. And so there's a website, Beauty in Transition, and my practice is Beauty in Transition coaching. So if anyone is interested in that, or even wants to see what life coach is about, they can do that. Let me also say that I do have a master's in social work, so I'm not just pretending to do this. You know, some people, they be like,
that's a nice disclaimer.
You know, some people be like, wait a minute, what you know about that?
So you're in safe hands. You're not dealing with someone who's taking a chances. She understands psychology, and it's a field of a study for her. I think in closing, I wish you well. I wish you well. I know you work so hard for the continent. You love your people. I mean, when you spoke, you said about humanity. That's a big word. It's the biggest love for human beings. And it's a mammoth task. You know, I wish you the very best in everything that you're working on, and let's meet in the street and the corridors of
Let's do it.
Thanks so much for watching the podcast. We'll come back the next week or so with another guest. Enjoy the rest of your day. Godspeed.